had to choose which type of life I was going to live. I had a million doorways to enter into to come back to my body again. And it said to me, choose light. And there was this big beam of light in the middle of all of these collective doorways, sort of like a big flower, all these petals of doors going outward. And all of this light was radiating out through these petals.
Today, I'd like to welcome Peter Panagore to the show. Welcome, Peter. It's such an honor to have you here. How's your day treating you so far?
Thanks for having me here, Chrissy. And so far, my day's been great, and it just got funnier and even better.
Yes, we had quite a few giggles prior to
We did.
pressing record. So, uh, well, we'll let the giggles settle down for a few minutes. I have been looking forward to this conversation. I've seen you share your story on many other podcasts, and I am just really excited to be able to be here with you and have you share your story with me and all the listeners. So, that being said, let's start with your NDE and anything you want to share leading up to it or around it or after it. It's totally, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks for having me too. I'll make my story a little briefer. My story is it's a long story. The the time where I spent when I was dead has a lot of complexity to it, and many things happened during it. So that alone is a fairly long tale, and I'll make the leading up to it rather brief. I was young, and I was in my early 20s. It was 1980. I was ice climbing in British Columbia, Western Canada. It was my first ice climb, but not my first exposure to mountaineering and outdoor adventure. Been doing that for most of my life. I was even on the National Ski Patrol at the time, working at a major resort as a college student. So outdoors and wilderness, my thing, and adventure, high adventure. So we made this ice climb. This man who was a new friend of mine, but who I was trusting with my life for this entire week. It was spring break, and we went on this 10-day snow caving ice climbing trip, not
Mhm.
including travel time. And so we
Right.
had already been skiing out into the backcountry and living in snow caves and had this really fabulous time together. Learned to trust each other. It was great. And then we made this ice climb, and Tim was a certified lead climber, having just completed his certification. And I'd never ice climbed. I'd rock climbed a lot, technical climbed.
Mm.
So this was a new event for me. And I didn't have all the gear. I made a mistake, and I talked Tim into my mistake. I chose to make the climb with an axe and a hammer rather than two axes because I was young and determined. You could say young and foolish, but I'm going to choose determined. Decided that I could make this climb with these two pieces of equipment, one of which was too small for the job, but I did do the climb. I made the climb, but it slowed our climb down significantly, so that by the time that we were nearing the top of the climb, we both already knew that we were in a very serious situation because we were in the middle of the wilderness. Even though we were right off the Ice Fields Parkway, it's still the middle of Western Canada and the Rocky Mountains in March and 10 feet of snow on the ground. It's still nowheresville in terms of somebody coming to rescue you. The other teams who had been climbing that day had descended and were on their way out before we even reached the top of the climb, which was a three-pitch climb. When we reached the top of the climb, the sun set and hypothermia began immediately because the temperature dropped about 30 degrees, and the night was horrendous and terrifying and long. And we decided that we were going to die. We knew we were going to die. It was, we're 500 or 600 feet up. We're out of food. We have no dry clothes. There's no fire for us. There's no sleeping bag because it's a day climb, and it's dark. And we knew that we were going to die. And even if we snuggled up against the rock face or the ice face, because there was rock and ice on this climb, we were on the ice. But even if we snuggled up against the ice, we were going to die because we had no heat left. So we decided we had to persevere and press forward. And if we were going to die, we were going to die getting off the mountain. Tim had a super level head. I had a super level head, even though this was the most terrifying night of my life. I didn't lose my cool, and Tim didn't lose his cool, and we kept on with the program that we needed to follow in order to save our lives. A lot of things happened through that night, and they're all in my book. I will cut them out. The essential part is that the night got colder and colder, and hypothermia continued to advance and advance, which meant that we continued to lose our mental capacity because it steals your brain, even as it freezes your eyeballs and the tips of your fingers and everything else, and muscles start to freeze up and everything's jittering and shaking because of the shivers. It's a horrendous, fiery hot. It feels cold, feels hot. So it was so cold that everything was on fire. And we finally made it to the last rappel. Many, many, many hours and crazy things that happened in between, mistakes and accidents. And we're one pitch up, 100, 150 feet up. We're clipped into the mountain the first time. We're safe all night because there are iron rings epoxied into the mountain on pins with carabiners and straps and carabiners that we hooked to our harnesses. So we weren't going to fall for the first time in the dark, making this whole traverse and descent. But the rope got stuck. I had the rope. My partner Tim was to my left. I was strapped into the mountain. I took one end of the rope called the bitter end. Every rope has two bitter ends. I took one bitter end and I tied it to my harness. I took the other one and I tossed it out around this corner and into the dark, into this craggy area that we had just descended down, and turned the corner and stood on this ledge. And as I pulled the rope, the very first pull I took on it, it jammed up and around the corner. And it jammed in maybe between some rocks. I'm not sure, obviously between rocks, but I'm not sure what that looked like because I couldn't see it. Not only was it dark, it was around the corner. And every time I pulled the rope, it just jammed deeper and deeper. And I couldn't reascend because I didn't have a rope for safety and I had very little coordination left. It was very difficult to move. Our thinking was inhibited. Our speech was inhibited. Our everything about us. We were in deep, deep, deep trouble. So the rope got stuck and that was it. There was no going up and there was no going down. And we could hear the river that was below us bubbling all night long. And the highway was right down there, not far from us. But no cars were going by and there was no way to flag them anyway from where we were. So long story short, that part of the journey went on and on. I finally accepted my situation, that I was going to die, and a peace came over me and I began to fall asleep. And when I would fall asleep, I'd fall down to the rock and stand back up again and pull on the rope. And I stood back up this time. And as I stood up, I had tunnel vision, which was this big black circle around my peripheral vision that closed very rapidly. And as it closed, I looked around. I looked at Tim. I looked at the rock. I looked at the mountain over there, and I didn't understand what was going on. And as it went to dark, as it faded to dark, I thought to myself, I must be falling asleep, because every other time I'd fallen asleep, it was like a curtain drop. This was different. It was a curtain drop to fall asleep, kaboom, and I would lose consciousness. And so this thing was closing down, and I thought, well, I must be falling asleep. What else could be happening? But as it closed, I didn't lose consciousness. I gained consciousness. I suddenly, as it collapsed, I felt all of my pain go away. And I was where the mountain was. I couldn't figure out, I must have fallen. Why is the mountain in front of me? Why do I feel like I'm upright? Where's the mountain gone? Was it the mountain that had been in front of me was gone? And the darkness that extended from where I was out into infinity was a fullness. I didn't understand what was going on, but I knew all my pain had gone, and I could sense that this was a tumultuous change that I was undergoing. And way far in the distance, a little tiny pinprick of light appeared and came rushing toward me, and it communicated to me telepathically, but not with language, not like I'm thinking a thought and I'm hearing words. It's thinking and I'm hearing words. There's no words involved. It was a download of data, and the data was, I'm taking you and I'm all powerful. And I resisted, saying, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm not going anywhere. And it just took me anyway and pulled me right out of myself. And I felt a severing from my body. I was no longer attached to my body. I'd been out of my body previously in my other mystical experiences of my childhood. And this time was different because there was no attachment. And I was enveloped in this angelic being, this orb of consciousness, this super intelligence, this super comfort. And it was feeding me love and welcome and contentment, and it whisked me back up the way that we had come. I had all these experiences of being in two places at once. All this paradox was going on. I was inside of this angelic being, this intelligence, and I was outside of it. The part of me that was inside of it, I had the shape of a human form, but a light body. Not everything I'm saying is metaphor. So it wasn't photons, but I might say photons, but it's not that. And it was, but I had a shape of a human form, but I was made of light itself. And I was being whisked up and back toward the destination we were going to, which I didn't know at the time what it was. But I was also outside. And I was like an eye of God outside, seeing myself inside the angelic being and moving along in parallel with it. But when I looked over from the inside to see this eye of myself, this eye of God, myself, outside myself, seeing me, I couldn't see it from the inside. I could see it from the outside. And so, and I knew myself as being both this I, non-locus, and this being inside the angelic form. And I know that that's difficult to understand. It is everything, everything there, not everything. Paradox is normal there. It's not this or that, it's this and that simultaneously. And so this angelic being was like a reduction. I could tell that it was fully present and for me and totally able in and of itself to be itself, but it also was the divine being also. And so it was superpositioned. It was in this infinite all love, and it was a less than the infinite all love at the same time. And it brought me to this edge of this space, and this space opened, and I was popped out into. Did I'm not really clear whether this angelic being became this or popped me into this or was already part of this. It's a fuzzy place for me. But I was suddenly inside of this infinite void. But this void was darkness and illumination, and it extended in every direction to the edge of infinity, which I could see. I could see infinity, but I couldn't see into infinity. There was a point at which the darkness became utterly dark. And I could see the size of the universe, say. If I were on our planet in the middle of the universe, I could see the entire universe and there was nothing in it but me. And then the edge of infinity began. And I was in contentment. And I was an orb of light. I was an orb of consciousness. And I was gigantic in comparison to my physical self. And I knew myself that this was who I am. This has always been who I have been. And I remember thinking, how did I forget that this was me? And I was thinking without language. There was no sequence of words inside my head or even a sequence of ideas. I didn't have a brain. I didn't have any physical form at all, but I was this orb of consciousness. And so my sense of self, of self-understanding, of thinking, of feeling was all one thing. There was no differentiation. It's not like I prick my finger and I know that's different than seeing from my eye. They were the same thing. And I could see in every direction at once. And in this greater darkness, I knew myself and I was content. There was no fear or frightening, and all of my pain had gone away. And I had this sense of, power is not the right word, because I wasn't powerful, in and of myself, but there was a sense of well-being to the I felt so well that I became powerful in my well-being. It was such a radiant thing.
Yeah.
And then this light opened in front of me. And this light opened in front of me, and it was gigantic in comparison to me. And it moved toward me, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was all colors and all frequencies, electromagnetic. If you imagine the electromagnetic spectrum from X-ray all the way through infrared and everything, all of the colors and frequencies, it was all of that and more. And they were all in this white light, and they were all like these individual specks of these electromagnetic frequencies, but they were also all white light at the same time. They weren't flipping from one to the other. They were simultaneously both. They were many and one. And as I saw this beauty, it rushed toward me because I wanted it. I was like, what is this? And I moved toward it with the mere thought of my desire for it. And as I came close to it, it had this solidity to its surface, and I wanted to touch it. And as I touched it, I saw the solidity become translucence and transparency and solidity all at the same time. And it infilled me and surrounded me. It opened me and poured into me and inflated me. And all these things happened at once. And I talk about it in a chronology, but there's only timelessness here. There is no sequence of events that happened. That's how I talk about it here, in the same way I use metaphors. And so as it infilled into me, I could see through it into the edge of infinity, into the edge of this darkness that I was traveling toward as it poured into me. And it was speaking to me the whole time, but not in language. And I couldn't see it, but it was all that there was. And I went through a whole bunch of things. I saw myself being seen. I saw my human life. I saw all of the things that I had done in my human life. There was nothing that I had done that was hidden or in darkness. Everything was completely known, and I knew that I was known by my maker, by creator. I knew I was creature. I knew I could see myself being called into being in the midst of my life review, where I was seeing and experiencing all of the pain that I had given away in my life. Simultaneously, I could see the origin of my coming into being, made by creator. And the suffering that I went through was that I experienced all of the pain that I'd ever given away in my life from the interior point of view of everybody that I'd hurt in a sequence. Simultaneously, I was superpositioned. I was inside of them as them, experienced like a walk-in, experiencing their experience. But I was also who I had been in that life. And I was going through all of the reasons and emotions that were motivating me to cause the pain that I was causing. And so I had these 2 points of view. I had me as the pain giver and this whole series of pain receivers from me. And there was a disproportion between the amount of pain that I thought that I was giving and the amount of pain that was actually experienced. The amount of pain that was actually experienced was mega times more. And it turned out that pain that I had given away had accrued to me. It was whatever I gave away, I became. And meanwhile, as this was going on, I could see the divine being. I said that I couldn't see it, but I could see its purity. I could see its enormity. I could see its, like, the voice that was speaking to me this whole time. I couldn't see the mouth of it, but the experience of its majesty was in my smallness was very apparent. My limited nature and its eternal self was well, I felt shame for all I had done because of this amount of unconditional love that was just present, that I had missed in life. And I could see all of humanity's equality of bad behavior. And it was like a thin line. We're all in the same thin line of our bad behavior. And I could see this lifetime human beings. And that included everybody, everybody. And there was no, I was not above or below any other wound giver of any sort. And all because all of us had this comparison this way. I could see this way, the unlimited to our limitations. And it made all of our limitations super similar. So I wasn't judging this way. And I judged myself in comparison to the divine being. And was speaking to me all the way along. It was showing me my original self. And it was saying, I love you. I love you. I have always loved you. As I went through all those experiences, it was present with me, experiencing the pain that I had given away from my interior, and also with all the people that I had hurt, with them simultaneously, with everybody simultaneously. And that I was loved even as I gave the pain away. And all I had to do was listen to the love that I had given away in life, and the love that had been given to me. I could see that as well. And that became my opening to hearing the strength of the voice saying, I love you. I love you. I've always loved you. I've never not loved you. I've loved you eternally. And as that happened and I listened, I healed. All of my pain vanished, all of the wounds, all my guilt, all my shame. And I wasn't judged. This was all interior. I had made these things of my life. They were burned away in the cosmic eye of the divine fire of purgative love. I was just, all of that was evaporated.
Can I ask
Deep,
you a
yeah,
question here?
sure.
Because I feel like what you just said is so incredibly important. And I want to just highlight it and make sure I'm tracking it as for the listeners as well. So all the pain that you had given away from your interior, you are feeling from their experience as well. And once you saw the love you gave away, everything's happening in you. And once you saw the love you gave away and felt that come back to you, then you could feel the love from the divine being, and you healed all of the pain.
All of it was healed. And I had to take my attention off myself. I had to put my attention on love and light. And as soon as I did that, I inflated with healing. Like I can't describe to you the size I became of wellness, bliss, beauty, love, joy, hope, understanding, knowledge, adoration, awe, wisdom, charity, truth. I became, and they're all one thing. And I just expanded inside of my wellness bubble. I was a bubble of wellness, to this point at which one more drop of it, I would have annihilated and felt like I would have gone back into the fullness of the divine itself. And I could see my original self. I could see the long tail of my incarnating self. And I could see the lives that I had lived, and that the only one of those that were actually me was the photonic self, which was this core of the very origin of my being called into being over eons, but also in the very moment of my existence there. So there's this juxtaposition of ancient and absolutely now present, of timelessness, and that I was superpositioned with this field of photons that was infinite, deep and tall and wide, and I was one of the divine being, one with the divine being, but also separate from it. So there was this field of a bazillion photons speaking to me, being the divine, and I was one of those photons, but I was outside of it, outside of the mass, superpositioned to it. So I was part of it, but I was also a limited form of it. And I saw the life of me that is my long soul, that is always being created but had an origin. And it was through that form of me that I was incarnated in all these lives. uh, but none of those were me. The only me that was really me was this light particle of being, even though I was experiencing all these other things. And all these lives that I had lived were all simultaneous from my point of view. They were all happening right then and there. I saw into some of my lives, and then this part of my experience, the way I describe it in this chronology, was reduced. I reduced back to a remembrance of my recent life as Peter, and I thought of my parents. And my sister had vanished when I was a kid, run away, and broke my family pretty badly. I had a lot of reverberations that came from that pain, and in an instant, I was swept across the heaven into the edge of the universe. And I should say, meanwhile, the divine is always speaking love to me and always welcoming me home. Come home, come home. Here I am. I'm bliss. Have me, fill me, love me. You know, you belong to me. I'm creator. You're a creature. And as I thought about my parents, I was swept across heaven and to this edge where the universe begins, our universe begins, and I was kind of poked out, like as if I had a head poked out into our universe, but I didn't really have a head. And most of me, 99% of me, was still inside the divine being. But I could see the origin of our universe. I could see the unfolding of many other universes. I couldn't see into the darkness itself, but I saw the place at which the darkness became light, and also then became a different kind of darkness that created the universes. So like the main darkness was emanating light, and that light became all of these other universes with light woven into it, including our universe. And our universe was this weave of light over which was layered and entombed, light entombed inside of everything there is, all the galaxies, all the stars and the planets. And I was in the middle of the universe. I could see all these galaxies and stars, and everything was made out of the divine being. And it was speaking to me, and its voice, which had no sound and no language, was reverberating from the darkness, this deep, deep darkness that was creating all of these universes. And it was unconditional love. The whole thing, all these universe, one after the other, and our universe too, all made of love. And it's speaking to me, and it says to me, in the way that I love you now. And I felt the fullness of all of this love, like universes of love, all directed right at me. Like I'm the most important particle in all of these universes. And it shows me this unconditional full love that I'd always been this. And as it shows me this, it shows me Earth. And I see our planet like a hologram with billions of people on it. And I see inside of every single person this same light that I am, this photon, and the my beloved nature is the same beloved nature of every single person living. And the voice was saying, nothing is lost. Everything is I am. I am all there is. I am love, and nothing of me is ever lost because I am eternity itself. I am creator itself. And I could see that Earth was covered with this very thick fog or foam or something through which the human beings could not see the light inside the other person. They were blind to it, but I could see it. And I could see the ultimate nature of them, and that all are beloved. And that my parents then showed up. I could see their mom and dad, and then I saw mom and dad, two sets of mom and dad, and mom and dad. And mom and dad one, I could see their lives without me. I saw what their lives of suffering would be should they lose me. And in mom and dad two, I could see their lives should I live. And both lives had suffering, but life B had less suffering than life A. But their endings were the same. I couldn't see their actual deaths, but I could see that they were as beloved as me no matter what happened, and that all of this was timelessness, and that in a moment, in the wink of an eye, they would be finished with their lives and with the divine in the presence of this bliss with me. And I could see the timelessness myself and decided that if all's the same with the divine God, that could I go back and live this life, be with them so that they would suffer less if I could come back to this bliss space that I'm in now. So I asked, can I go back? And if I go back and I live, can I come back here? And the voice promised me, yes, you come back here to this bliss, to this love, to this beauty, to this wellness. But meanwhile, it's also inviting me home. It's like, you can come. It's your choice, but you can come. I'll come home. And I said, I choose to live my life. And it said to me, you won't live your life, and sent me back. And as I went back, I had to choose which type of life I was going to live. I had a million doorways to enter into to come back to my body again. And it said to me, choose light. And there was this big beam of light in the middle of all of these collective doorways, sort of like a big flower, all these petals of doors going outward. And all of this light was radiating out through these petals. And I chose some humanity, and I made some choices, and I didn't choose the pure light. I chose off to the side in the illumination, but not without humanity, my humanness. And I could have chosen no humanness, but I chose some. And I went through this doorway, and in this tunnel, there were all these other doorways, and all these other doorways led to all these other tunnels, either closer to the light or further from the light. And down this tunnel I went, and I ended up with being carried by this angelic being, and I got smaller and smaller and smaller, denser and denser, more compressed and more compressed. And as I came to my body, which I didn't recognize as my body, it's like, oh, look at that interesting scene. There's a guy bending over, shaking this other guy who's lying on the mountain, and I could see that it was dark, and then it's like, oh, that's me. And the angelic being shoved me through my chest back into, slit me open, so to speak, and shoved me inside. And then I was inside, and I could see through this opening, and I could see this angelic being, more dense like me, closer to the earth form, but definitely not an earth form, but closer to it. And I could see back toward heaven, and I could see the light of being of this angelic being. And I watched this thing close, and then I was entombed. I was encased in this body, and my brain came back on. And as it came back on, pain was my first experience of this new hellscape that I was in. And I was completely confused because I still had my heavenly mind. I didn't understand what this thing was I was in, or why it caused me so much pain. My hearing came on, and I could hear Tim screaming at me, and I didn't understand what was going on. I opened my eyes, and he was yelling, don't die, don't die, don't die. Oh my God, he sees that I'm open. My eyes are open. He's like, don't, oh, you were dead, you were dead. And he pulls me up. And after a time, I come back to my senses, although I am an entirely different person. And I know that I'm not who I was. I still feel like an alien inside a body. And the rope came free on the first pull, and we descended, and we self-treated for hypothermia. And the story goes on for the last 40 years. It's near-death experience isn't something that's over, at least not for me. It's something that is constant.
Yeah. Wow. I love hearing your story every time you share it. And I know that there's things that happened right after you came back. But I really want to, there's so many things about your story that I would love to ask millions of questions about. And I know we're limited on time, but you mentioned that when you came back into your body, it was confusing because you still had your heavenly mind. And when you were presented with this flower of doorways, as you were in that bliss, I'm curious if there was any kind of decision-making process that caused you to not choose the full lit door and choosing the one with humanity. I think that's really, really important that like in our essence, we still choose humanity. So was there a decision-making process for you at that point? And
In
what
a
was it?
flash, it was a flash of a decision-making process, because I didn't have any brain to, I still didn't have a brain. So I didn't have to go through a reasoning process, but there was definitely a decision. And
Yeah.
I remember thinking, if I'm going to, I knew that I had a mission. I knew that by the time I reached the doorway, I knew that as I made this choice, that I had a job to do. And that if I was going to do my job as a communicator, I had to have flaws. I had to be a human being. I couldn't return to Earth as some kind of angelic, super being, because who would be able to relate to me? I had to come back as some kind of broken thing. And so half human, half divine. And I remember choosing, I wanted some bohemian in my life. I wanted creativity. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to have fun. I wanted, all these things happened all at once, but mostly I wanted a level of brokenness. I wanted a level of just being able to be approached, because I am so human, not so far away as to be unreachable. Because the all of my life, now that I made that choice, I've spent my entire life striving to undo that and aiming myself as close as I can back to the light itself. Because now I found that it was unreachable for me too. And so my pursuit came in my choice. And it also made my job more difficult and easier. Easier because I have never pretended not to be a flawed human being. I am a totally flawed human being. Ask anybody in my town or in my family. I just am trying to be myself. And sometimes that's uh sometimes anyway, sometimes it's trouble and sometimes it's not. But I figured that I came from a blue collar town, a lot of blue collar workers in my town, and I worked in construction and I worked in shoe factories, and I realized that I just wanted to be an ordinary person. I didn't want to be something set apart, because how could that be? How could anybody talk to someone like that?
I just think that's so profound because in your story and many others and pre-birth memories, it's always the same theme that we chose to sign up for challenges and struggles because that is really what I understand. That's really why we want this human experience. And so, yeah, I think that's just absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much. I'm curious. I know there's so much more that happened after this. And so I know that there was like a car accident and you went to jail. And so all of this happened in like 24 hours. And I know we don't have a lot of time to cover all of that, but I'm just curious, how did you reintegrate uh, after healing your body? How did you reintegrate with all of this awareness? Did you remember right away? Can you share what that was like?
Oh, I didn't. I couldn't not remember. It was a loud, roaring waterfall like Niagara Falls inside of me, inescapable, always always present to me. I couldn't shut it off. I couldn't walk away. There was nowhere to go. And it was just calling me and calling me, saying my name, but not Peter, but the origin of myself, always this roar inside of me. And I didn't know how to integrate. The internet didn't exist. I had never heard of near death experience. I stumbled into Kriya Yoga and hatha yoga, and I'd had a background in centering prayer practice out of the Catholic Church, which was a contemplative form of meditation developed by a bunch of monks who happened to be near my prep school. I went to a Catholic school, and they happened to be in the monastery nearby teaching this thing, having studied with Jack Kornfield himself, these monks. And so I dove into my meditation life. So after all of those things, I was on this theater tour. It's in a theater company, and we were leaving on this extended tour around the United States, like within weeks of this thing, of this event in my life. And so I hid in the back of the pickup truck by myself, with my sleeping bag for 24,000 miles, and stayed out of the 15-passenger van, and I meditated. And so my initial integration was to dive inside myself, because I knew that the only doorway that I had was inside of me. And so I immediately went into my interior world, because my exterior world was both the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, other than heaven, which was a bazillion times better. But the light was permeating everything there was. And it was the light that was most beautiful, but the world was as thin as onion paper and as fragile as a china cup. It's just this broken, thin, weak world. And so the only thing I knew that was real, with a capital R, was inside of me. And so I went in that direction. It took me, I'm still integrating. This is 40 years later. I had another near-death experience in 2015 and a bunch of mystical things in between. And I'm still in the process. But what I found was I made some certain choices. I stumbled into Kriya Yoga and Hatha Yoga as soon as I got back to my university the next fall. And I found that I carried back with me chi or prana or Holy Spirit or divine energy, or whatever you want to call this thing that is the myself. This is not something separate from me. I don't carry this. This is me. As soon as my teacher showed me where it was to find it, it was real for me. And so I began this process of trying to activate this inside of myself with the process of detachment from my egoic mind, these two things, energizing, creating a cavern inside myself, working my prana, finding my chi, using the Yoga Sutras and Paramahansa Yogananda, and I went to divinity school to study mysticism. I went to Yale to get an advanced degree in I was a secret. Nobody really knew what I was doing. The dean let me do it, but nobody had any idea of what was going on. But I was researching the history of mysticism in the West in particular, in order to find other people like me. And so part of my integration process was discovering that there's a whole history of people like me. And in the West, it's people like Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Meister Eckhart, and then you get Rumi and Hafez and Lao Tzu, and it's a global thing. Mysticism is a global phenomenon, and it's in the Upanishads and the Vedas. It's in the Bible. It's all over the place. Once you have eyes to see and a mind to think. So that was part of my integration process too. But that was my communication process. That was the ability, that was learning language to think about what happened to me and apply metaphors and symbols and allegories and similes to things that are ineffable and unspeakable for myself, so that I could figure out some way to live with this, because I was a freaking alien. Everybody around me was the same, and I was completely different. There was light radiating out of people. There was light radiating from everywhere I looked. There was light radiating, and people's suffering became mine. I would be near people and I would be feeling their feelings. I would lose sense of myself. I couldn't tell where I began and where they began. I had this constant sort of difficulty. The integration process for me is the practice of the non-attachment to my own egoic mind, and the cultivation of space of the divine energy in me that is not imaginary, but experiential and felt. And it's the ground of my being now. It's how I live in the world. And it's an ongoing process, because I am not infinite here. I am finite. And as long as I am finite in here, I continue my journey back to my own origin. So my integration process, when will it end? The day I die. And even then, it doesn't end then. It just ends here then.
Right. That leads me to another curiosity. And I'm gonna try to make sense of what I'm thinking and seeing in my mind. So when you were describing your experience, you kept saying that everything was a paradox. You were in this being and you were also out of this being, and you were experiencing things from your point of view, but also everyone else's point of view. During that experience, when you were on the other side, was that confusing to you, or did
Not at all.
it just made sense? Okay, so
It
does
was,
that
yeah.
experience, does that make it easier or more challenging to be here in this human world?
Much more challenging. This is, I have stumbled and fallen my way through this life ever since that day. My daily experience is that the only reality that there is this place of paradox, and that this place here is so much less than, and it is in society. It's easier. I divide it between nature and society. In nature, I'm totally cool. Nature speaks to me. The birds love me. The animals are my friends. The trees are my buddies. I'm really good. Even the poison ivy and the bumblebees and the wasps that bite you. I'm good with all of that. But with human beings, everything we think is made up. It's all in our heads. We've invented all of our social structures, all of our cultures, all of our belief systems, all of it is all in our heads. And it's super fluid and not really permanent or real. And so I'm constantly, I, I, I am a known eccentric in where I live, and people love me or they don't, because for the same reasons, because of my eccentricity. Is either they like me, or they don't. Um, I I struggle with a lot of things that human beings find of interest. I find utterly boring, and things that I find fascinating, other people have no interest in. That includes just about everything that there is. Um, so I masked. I lived hidden for 20 years. I told nobody about my experience. I told my wife the day after I got married, which was a total bad thing to do, to her. She knew I was different. I mean, I couldn't pretend that I was other than I am. I just didn't tell anybody why, and I tried to keep a mask on. I found that masking it made my social life easier, but it made my interior life twisted because I couldn't be myself. So it'd be like going to a cocktail party, and you're at this cocktail party and everybody's talking about the great, you know, rivalry between these two hockey teams. And I just don't care. I just don't. I mean, I like to play hockey, but I don't really care about these, it's fun, but who cares? It's not important. But I would join in the game. I would join in the conversation. I'd be like, oh yeah, that number 4. Like having no idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I teach authenticity. I teach how to relate authentically, and it became an obsession and a passion of mine in 2015, a couple years after I got sober, because I did
Oh
not have an
yeah.
experience like you, but the masking, and that's a very lonely place to be. And
Yep.
yeah, so I 100% get it. I know that we've been talking for a while, and I do have a couple of questions that I ask all my guests. But before we go there, is there anything that you would like to share about what we've talked about or not talked about?
Don't worry about your life. The moment that you die, if your heart is aimed toward love and light, you'll have an evolution that you can't even imagine. It is so much better and freeing and contentment and love and peace and knowledge and movement and freedom. And that here you could spend your life in meditation, which I do, and practice some spiritual practices, but you don't have to. And you don't need a near-death experience. All you need to do is love the best you can where you are and try to find the light inside yourself. And when you do, you'll find it in others, because it's the one thing that there is that's real. It's in everything there is. And if you can't do any of that, just love as best you can. There's no perfection here.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. The first question that I ask all my guests is, how do you define God?
I don't. No definition. I pick two words, love and beauty, or love and light, or love and truth, or maybe 100 words like that. But they're not definitions. They're metaphors. It is so far beyond human conception that no religion, no gender, no idea comes even close. All, instead of defining it, I try to let it live inside of me. And instead of trying to imagine it or think about it, I try to quiet my mind to be with it. And then I know it knows me.
The second question is, what would you say is the purpose of life?
Love. Love the best we can. That's it.
I love the simplicity of that. Thank you. And the final question is, if you could take one piece of wisdom that you have now and offer it to a younger version of yourself, what would that one piece of wisdom be?
That what you see of yourself is not who you are. That your physical self, emotional self, psychological self, that's a lower level of you. What you actually are is the divine light itself. And that this is experiential. And if you go in pursuit of it, if you use the tools that have been handed down through centuries and stick with them, and what they are essentially breath, body, and mental focus, and they eliminate the access, they eliminate the attachment to the false self, that you'll find an energy inside of you that'll include humility, that'll change everything about you and channel heaven here now. And then you get the giver, and with the giver, you get all these gifts. And they might not be what you think you need, but they're definitely better than you will ever think you do need. That was a terrible sentence.
Thank you so much for that. I love it. When I first got sober, I learned that one of my mantras became, God's will for me is better than I could ever imagine. And I have a really good imagination.
Yes, it's and it is. A lot of people try to manifest what they want in life, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I try to manifest stuff like my manifesting the my college degree. You know, I worked hard and I made that happen. But better for me to manifest heaven now inside myself, because that's what's really lasting. It is, and the gifts that come from that are not things, but there's strength and courage, perseverance, fortitude, humility, kindness, mercy, love, compassion, strength. The gifts are the gifts of selflessness, and they create a better world.
Thank you. That was beautiful. How do people find you?
I'm at Peter Panagore peterpanagore.love. And I'm on YouTube and Instagram and all these other places, but peterpanagore.love. And I talk to people all the time. So if you want to talk to me, I'm available for spiritual counseling. I specialize in mystics. People have had transformative experiences. peterpanagore.love. That's where I am.
I'll include all your information in the description of the show.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you so much again for joining me today, for sharing your story, not just with me, but with everywhere you share your story. It's so powerful and it helps so many people. So thank you for being you, and thank you for choosing to come back with
Thanks,
humanity and sharing what you know with us. It's been a pleasure.
Mine too, Chrissy. Thank you for having me, and peace to everybody.
I would like to personally thank you for tuning in to this episode. If you haven't already, please be sure to like this episode, subscribe to my channel, and turn on notifications so that you never miss a beat. And if you really resonated with this content, please share it with all of your friends so that collectively we can expand our consciousness. Have a very blessed week.